The notification sound from my phone cut through the quiet of my Chicago apartment like a knife. It was past 11 on a Sunday night, and I was curled up on my couch with a cup of chamomile tea, scrolling mindlessly through social media before bed. The rain was pattering against my windows, creating that rhythmic sound that usually helped me relax after another exhausting week at the marketing firm where I worked. I almost ignored the notification. Almost. But something made me tap. On it, maybe it was the fact that it came from my cousin Sarah, who rarely posted anything on Instagram. The image loaded slowly, and when it finally appeared on my screen, I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. There was my father, Robert, sitting at the head of a long table in what looked like a private dining room at Romano's, his favorite Italian restaurant downtown. He was wearing his best navy suit, the one he reserved for special occasions, and there was a huge smile on his face as he held up a glass of what I knew would be his preferred red wine, a 2015 Barolo that he'd been saving for years. But it wasn't just my father in the photo. The table was packed with people I recognized immediately. My older brother Marcus with his wife Jennifer and their 2 kids, my younger brother David, my Aunt Patricia and Uncle Mike, my cousins Sarah, Tom, and Lisa with their partners, even the Hendersons from next door to Dad's house in Oak Park. The cake in front of him was elaborate. 3 tiers with Happy 65th Birthday, Robert, written in elegant script across the top. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, drowning out even the sound of the rain. This was my father's 65th birthday party, the milestone birthday we'd talked about months ago when he'd mentioned wanting to do something special. And I wasn't there. I scrolled through Sarah's other photos from the evening with trembling fingers. There were pictures of everyone toasting, laughing, sharing stories. There was a photo of Marcus giving a speech, holding up his glass while everyone else listened with warm smiles. Another showed Dad opening presents, his face lit up with joy as he unwrapped what looked like a vintage watch from David. In every single photo, there was an empty chair next to my father. Just one empty chair in a room full of family and friends, and I knew, somehow, I just knew, that chair should have been mine. I felt tears building behind my eyes, but I fought them back. There had to be an explanation. Maybe the invitation got lost in the mail. Maybe there was a mix-up with phone numbers. Maybe Dad thought Marcus or David had invited me. There had to be some rational explanation for why I, Emma Catherine Morrison, the daughter who called him every Sunday, who visited him every other weekend, who helped him set up his new smartphone and taught him how to use Netflix, wasn't at his birthday celebration. I immediately opened my text messages and scrolled through my recent conversations with Dad. Our last exchange had been 3 days ago, on Thursday evening. He'd sent me a photo of his garden, showing off the tomatoes that were finally starting to ripen, and I'd responded with heart emojis and told him I was proud of his green thumb. Nothing about a birthday party. Nothing about Saturday night plans. Then, I checked my messages with Marcus. We didn't talk frequently, maybe once or twice a month, but surely he would have mentioned something about Dad's party if he was helping to organize it. Our last conversation was from 2 weeks ago when he'd asked if I wanted to split the cost of a new lawnmower for Dad's yard work. Nothing about a birthday celebration. David and I texted more regularly, usually sharing memes and complaining about work. I scrolled back through our messages from the past week. Wednesday, he'd sent me a funny video from TikTok. Friday, I'd asked him if he wanted to grab lunch over the weekend, and he'd said he was busy but didn't elaborate. Now I knew why. He was busy. I set my phone down on the coffee table and stared at it like it might suddenly ring with an explanation. The apartment felt too quiet now, too still. The rain had stopped, and without that gentle background noise, I could hear everything. The hum of my refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic on Lakeshore Drive, the upstairs neighbor's television, playing some late-night talk show. This wasn't like my family. Despite our occasional disagreements and the normal tensions that come with any family, we were close. We made an effort to include each other in important events. When Marcus got promoted to partner at his law firm, we all went out to celebrate. When David bought his first house, we all helped him move and then had a barbecue in his backyard. When I got my master's degree 2 years ago, they all came to my graduation ceremony, even though it was on a rainy Saturday morning, and the ceremony lasted 3 hours. So why was this different? Why was I the only one left out? I picked up my phone again and opened Sarah's Instagram post. The caption read, "Amazing night celebrating Uncle Robert's 65th. So grateful for family and the memories we make together. Blessed unrun our family and our celebration." The post had been up for 2 hours and already had dozens of likes and comments from people I recognized. Other family members, family friends, people from Dad's work. I read through the comments, looking for any clue, any hint of why I hadn't been there. Aunt Patricia had written, "Beautiful evening, Robert looked so happy." Uncle Mike had added, "Great food, great company." My cousin Tom had commented with a simple string of heart emojis. But it was the comment from Mrs. Henderson, Dad's neighbor, that made my stomach drop even further. "It was wonderful to finally meet your whole family, Sarah. Robert talks about his children so much, and it was lovely to put faces to names. His whole family." She thought she had met his whole family, which meant either Dad had never mentioned me to his neighbors, or someone had told her that everyone was there when clearly, obviously, I was not. I closed Instagram and opened my contacts, my finger hovering over Dad's name. It was nearly midnight now, too late to call, but I was tempted anyway. I wanted answers. I needed to understand what had happened, why I'd been excluded from what was clearly a significant celebration. But something held me back. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was fear. Fear of what his explanation might be, or worse, fear that he might not have an explanation at all. Fear that he might say something like, "Oh, Emma, I didn't think you'd want to come." Or, "We kept it small," even though the pictures clearly showed it wasn't small at all. Instead, I set my phone aside and tried to think rationally about the situation. Maybe there was something I was missing, some context I didn't have. But as I replayed the past few weeks in my mind, I couldn't think of anything I'd done wrong, any argument we'd had, any reason why I would be deliberately I thought about our last conversation, just 3 days ago. Dad had seemed normal, happy even. He'd told me about his garden, asked about my work, mentioned that he was thinking about getting a new car to replace his aging Honda. Nothing in his tone or his words had suggested that he was planning a major celebration that wouldn't include me. The tears I'd been holding back finally came, and I let them fall as I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the remnants of my quiet Sunday evening. The empty teacup, the book I'd been reading, the soft throw blanket I'd wrapped around my shoulders. Everything felt different now, tainted by this discovery. I was 32 years old, a successful marketing director with my own apartment, my own life, my own circle of friends. I prided myself on being independent, on not needing constant validation from my family. But sitting there, looking at those photos of my father's celebration, I felt like a child again. The child who always tried so hard to make her parents proud, who studied extra hard for good grades, who volunteered to help with household chores, who never caused trouble or asked for too much. And now, apparently, I was the child who wasn't worth inviting to her own father's birthday party. I eventually made my way to my bedroom, but sleep didn't come easily. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction I'd had with my family over the past few months. Had I missed some subtle sign that I was being pushed out? Had there been some conversation, some moment where I'd said or done something that had offended them? My mind kept returning to the empty chair in the photos. Just one empty chair, positioned, right next to where my father was sitting. It seemed almost intentional, like a deliberate reminder of my absence. But maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe it was just a coincidence, an extra chair that happened to be there. But deep down, I knew better. That chair was meant for me, and for some reason, a reason I couldn't begin to understand, I hadn't been told about it. As I finally drifted off to sleep sometime after 2 a.m, my last coherent thought was a question that would haunt me for days to come. What had I done to deserve this? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? I barely slept that night, and when I did manage to drift off, my dreams were filled with images of family gatherings where I was always just outside the door, watching through windows as everyone else laughed and celebrated without me. I woke up Monday morning with puffy eyes and a headache that felt like it was pressing against the inside of my skull. The first thing I did was check my phone, hoping against hope that there would be a message from someone. Dad, Marcus, David, anyone, explaining what had happened. But there was nothing. Just the usual Monday morning emails from work and a text from my friend Ashley asking if I wanted to grab lunch later in the week. I made coffee with shaking hands and tried to focus on getting ready for work, but my mind kept wandering back to those photos. In the harsh light of morning, the whole situation seemed even more surreal. How do you just not invite one of your children to your birthday party? How do you coordinate with everyone else in the family and somehow leave out just one person? By the time I got to the office, I had made a decision. I was going to call Dad during my lunch break and ask him directly what had happened. I needed to know if this was some kind of misunderstanding or if there was something more deliberate going on. But as the morning wore on, I found myself chickening out. Every time I picked up my phone to dial his number, I would put it back down, telling myself I needed to think about what I was going to say, how I was going to approach the conversation without sounding accusatory or hurt. The truth was, I was terrified of what he might say. What if he told me that I hadn't been invited? Because they didn't want me there? What if there was some family discussion I didn't know about where they had all decided I was too busy, too distant, or simply not important enough to include? Around 11:30, my phone rang, and for a moment my heart leapt, thinking it might be Dad calling to explain everything, but it was Marcus. "Hey, Emma," he said, and there was something strange in his voice, a forced casualness that immediately put me on edge. "How's your Monday going?" "It's fine," I said, though it was anything but fine. "What's up?" "Nothing much. Just wanted to check in, see how you're doing." There was a pause, and I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. "Listen, I was wondering if you might want to have dinner this week sometime. Jennifer's making her famous lasagna Wednesday night, and we thought you might like to come over." The invitation felt like a bandage being offered for a wound he hadn't acknowledged, causing. I felt a flash of anger rise in my chest. "Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I saw the photos from Dad's birthday party." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost that forced cheerfulness. "Emma, why wasn't I invited?" I interrupted. "I don't understand what happened. Was I supposed to get an invitation that got lost? Did someone forget to call me? Because I'm looking at pictures of the whole family celebrating Dad's 65th birthday, and I wasn't there." Another pause. I could hear him sighing deeply. "It's complicated," he said finally. "Complicated how?" "Marcus, this is Dad's birthday. We're talking about his 65th birthday. What could possibly be so complicated that I wasn't even told it was happening?" "Look, can we talk about this in person? This isn't really a conversation for over the phone." "No," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "I want to know now. I want to know why my entire family got together to celebrate our father's birthday, and I was the only one left out. I want to know why there's an empty chair next to Dad in all the photos, like someone was supposed to be there but wasn't." Heard Marcus take a deep breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more serious. "Emma, Dad specifically asked us not to invite you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt like all the air had been sucked out of my lungs, and for a moment I couldn't speak at all. "What?" I finally managed to whisper. "He said he wanted to keep it small, just immediate family and a few close friends. He said he didn't want you to feel obligated to come." "Obligated?" The word came out louder than I intended, and I glanced around my office, grateful that I had closed my door earlier. "Marcus, he's my father. It's his birthday. When have I ever acted like spending time with family was an obligation?" "I don't know, Emma. I'm just telling you what he said." But there was something in his voice that told me there was more to it than that. My brother had never been a good liar, and I could hear the discomfort in his tone. "That's not the whole truth, is it?" I pressed. "There's something else, something you're not telling." "Emma, Marcus, I'm your sister. We've known each other our entire lives. I can tell when you're holding something back. What is it? What did I do wrong?" There was another long pause, and I could hear him moving around, probably finding somewhere more private to have this conversation. He's been upset with you," he said finally. "Upset about what?" "About the choices you've made, about your life, I felt like I was falling down a rabbit hole where nothing made sense. What choices? What about my life? Emma, you're 32 and you're not married. You don't have kids. You're living alone in that expensive apartment, focusing on your career instead of settling down and starting a family. The words were so unexpected, so completely out of left field that I actually laughed. A short, bitter sound that surprised me. Are you serious right now? Dad is upset with me because I'm not married? It's not just that, Marcus said quickly. Look, you know how Dad is. He has certain expectations about family, about what his children's lives should look like. Marcus and I both have wives, kids, houses in the suburbs. We have the kind of life he understands, the kind of life he approves of. And I don't. You chose a different. I stood up from my desk chair and started pacing around my small office, trying to process what I was hearing. Marcus, I have a master's degree. I have a good job that I love. I own my own apartment. I'm financially independent and emotionally stable. I have friends and hobbies and a life that makes me happy. How is any of that something to be upset? Dad doesn't see it that way. How does Dad see it? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a. He thinks you're selfish. He thinks you've chosen your career over family, and that you're running out of time to have the kind of life that actually matters. The cruelty of it took my breath away. I had to sit down, my legs suddenly feeling too weak to support me. He said that? He actually said I was selfish? Emma, I don't think he means, did he say it or not? Yes, he said it. I closed my eyes and tried to absorb this information. My father, the man who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my homework and told me I could be anything I wanted to be when I grew up, thought I was selfish because I hadn't followed the exact same life path as my brothers. What else? Did he say? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Emma, I really don't think. Marcus, please. I need to know. He sighed deeply. He said that you've become too independent, too focused on yourself. He said that you visit him out, of duty, not because you actually want to spend time with him. He said that you call him every Sunday because you think you're supposed to, not because you have anything meaningful to say to him. Each word was like a knife twisting in my. I thought about all those Sunday phone calls, how I genuinely looked forward to hearing about his week, his garden, his plans. I thought about the weekends I'd driven out to Oak Park to help him with household projects or just to sit on his porch and talk. I thought about how proud I'd been when he'd finally mastered FaceTime so we could see each other during our calls. And, you all agreed with him? I asked quietly. We didn't agree or disagree. We didn't want to cause a fight. Dad was planning his party, and he said he wanted it to be a certain way, with certain people there. We went along with it. You went along with excluding your sister from your father's birthday party. Emma, you're making this sound worse than it is. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like my entire family got together and decided I wasn't worth including in a major family celebration, and nobody even bothered to tell me about it. I had to find out by seeing photos on social media. We thought maybe it was better if you. The casual cruelty of that statement hit me harder than anything else he'd said. They had actively decided to keep me in the dark, to let me discover my exclusion accidentally through Instagram photos. Better for who? I asked. For everyone. For you, so you wouldn't be hurt. For Dad, so he could enjoy his party without any drama. For all of us, so we could just have a nice evening without having to deal with any conflict. So you protected everyone except me. Emma, no, Marcus. Don't try to make this better. You all made a decision to exclude me from something important. And then you made another decision to hide it from me. And now you're calling me on a Monday morning trying to invite me to dinner like nothing happened. Like I'm supposed to just pretend I don't know that my own family thinks so little of me. I could hear him trying to formulate a response, but I wasn't interested in hearing it anymore. I need to go, I said. I have work to do. Emma, wait. Can we please talk about this more? Can you come over Wednesday night and we can all sit down? And all? You mean you and Jennifer and David and Dad? The people who were all at the party I wasn't invited to? That's not. Yes, but we can work this out. We're family. Are we? I asked. Because family doesn't usually exclude each other from important events and then lie about it. I hung up before he could respond. I sat in my office chair, staring at my computer screen without really seeing it, trying to process everything Marcus had told me. My father thought I was selfish. He thought my visits were obligatory, my phone calls meaningless. He thought my life choices were wrong, that I was too independent, too focused on my career. The worst part was that I couldn't even defend myself against those accusations because I hadn't been given the chance. Instead of talking to me about his concerns, instead of having an honest conversation about our relationship, he had simply decided to exclude me from his celebration and hope I wouldn't find out about it. I thought about that empty chair again, positioned right next to where he'd been sitting. Had he looked at it during the party and thought about me at all? Had he wondered what I was doing that Saturday night while he was surrounded by family and friends? Or had he been relieved that I wasn't there, glad that he could enjoy his evening, without having to deal with his disappointment in his only daughter? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not just hurt, but genuinely angry. I was angry at Dad for making assumptions about my motivations and my feelings. I was angry at Marcus and David for going along with the exclusion instead of standing up for me. I was angry at myself for caring so much, for letting this hurt me so deeply. But underneath the anger, there was something else, a deep, aching sadness that felt like grief. I was mourning the relationship I thought I had with my father, the man I thought he was, the daughter I thought I was to him. If he really believed that I visited him out of duty and called him out of obligation, then he didn't know me at all. And if he didn't know me after 32 years of being my father, then maybe we had never been as close as I'd thought we were. Maybe that empty chair wasn't just about one birthday party. Maybe it represented something much bigger, the space I'd been occupying in my family without realizing that they didn't really want me there. That evening, I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone and trying to decide what to do next. Part of me wanted to call Dad directly and confront him about what Marcus had told me. Part of me wanted to drive out to Oak Park and show up at his door demanding answers. But mostly, I just felt empty, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left me hollow. I ordered Chinese takeout and tried to distract myself with Netflix, but I couldn't focus on anything. Every few minutes, my mind would drift back to the conversation with Marcus, to the photos from the party, to the realization that my father saw me so differently than I saw myself. Around 9 o'clock, my phone rang. It was David. I stared at his name on the screen for several rings before finally answering. "Hi," I said, not bothering to hide the exhaustion in my voice. "Emma, Marcus told me you guys talked today. Did he?" I set down my mostly untouched lo mein and curled up on my couch. "And what did he tell you about our conversation?" "He said you were upset about the party." "Upset?" I let out a humorless laugh. "That's one way to put it. Look, I know how this must seem to you, but do you? Do you really know how this seems to me, David? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like my entire family thinks I'm a selfish disappointment who doesn't deserve to be included in important family events. That's not true, isn't it? Because according to Marcus, Dad specifically asked that I not be invited because he thinks I'm too independent and career-focused, and that I visit him out of duty rather than love. And apparently, none of you thought there was anything wrong with that." David was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, more careful. "Emma, can I tell you something? Something I probably should have told you a long time ago." Something in his tone made me sit up straighter. "What?" "Dad's been talking about you differently for a while now. Maybe the past year or so. Making comments about your choices, your lifestyle. I always kind of brushed it off because no, that's just Dad being Dad. He has opinions about everything." "What kind of comments?" "When you got promoted last year, instead of being proud, he said something about how you were choosing work over family. When you bought your apartment, he complained about how expensive it was and said you were being impractical. When Ashley got engaged last month and you posted about her engagement party on Facebook, Dad made some comment about how you were always celebrating other people's relationships instead of focusing on your own." I felt a chill run down my spine. He's been criticizing me behind my back? Not criticizing, exactly. More like questioning. wondering out loud if you were happy, if you were making the right choices, if you were ever going to settle down, and give him grandchildren. Grandchildren? The word came out sharper than I intended. David, Marcus has 2 kids and you have one on the way. What does he need more grandchildren for? I don't know, Emma. I think it's more about what he expected. From you specifically. You know how he always talked about his little girl? How proud he was of how smart you were? How he always said you were going to make some man very happy someday. The phrase made me wince. I remember Dad saying things like that when I was younger, but I thought it was just typical father talk, not some kind of blueprint for how he expected my life to unfold. So, because I didn't follow his script for my life, he decided I wasn't worth celebrating. I think he's disappointed, David said quietly. And I think he's worried about. Worried about what? About you being alone? About you getting older without a partner, without kids? About what's going to happen to you when you're older and you don't have a family to take care of? I felt tears prick at my eyes again. But this time they were tears of frustration as much as hurt. David, I'm 32, not 62. And even if I never get married, even if I never have kids, that doesn't mean I'm going to be alone forever. I have friends, I have a career I love, I have interests and hobbies and a life that fulfills me. Why is that so hard for Dad to understand? I don't know. Maybe because it's not the life he had, or the life he pictured. But it's my life. It's the life I chose and I'm happy with it. Doesn't that matter? It should, David said, and I could hear genuine sadness in Emma, for what it's worth, I think Dad was wrong to exclude you from the party. I think we all were wrong to go along with it. I should have said, why didn't you? Because I'm a coward. Because it was easier to just go along with what Dad wanted than to start a fight about it. Because I told myself that maybe it really would be better if you didn't know, if you didn't have to deal with his judgment and criticism. But I did have to deal with it, David. I had to find out through social media that my own family thinks so little of me that they'd rather pretend I don't exist than include me in something important. We don't think you don't exist, don't you? Because that's exactly what it feels like. Like I'm invisible to all of you unless I'm doing something you disapprove of. We sat in silence for a moment, and I could hear David breathing heavily on the other end of the line. Emma, he said finally, there's something else I need to tell you. Something I found out tonight that I think you should know. My stomach dropped. I went to see Dad after work today. I wanted to talk to him about the party, about how wrong it was to exclude you. I thought maybe I could convince him to call you and apologize. And? He wasn't sorry. Not even a little bit. He said the party was exactly what he wanted it to be, and that including you did. The words hit. David paused, and I could tell he was struggling with whether to tell me whatever he was about to say. He said that you would have spent the whole evening judging everyone else's life choices and making comments about how you didn't need a husband or kid. I have never done that, not once. I know. I told him that. I told him that you're not judgmental, that you're supportive of our choices even if they're different from yours. But he said that's not how he sees it. How does he see it? He thinks you look down on us. On me and Marcus for getting married young, for having kids, for choosing traditional family lives. He thinks you think we're boring or conventional or somehow less than you because we didn't pursue big careers or live in the city. I was completely stunned. Nothing David was saying matched my experience of our family relationships at all. David, when you bought your house, I helped you move. When you told me Sarah was pregnant, I cried happy tears and immediately started shopping for baby gifts. When Marcus got promoted, I took him out to celebrate. How could Dad possibly think I look down on any of you? I don't know. But that's what he believes. Did you tell him he was wrong? I tried. But Dad's not really interested in hearing different perspectives right now. He's got his mind made up about you, and he's not open. I felt something inside me break a little bit more. It was one thing to learn that my father was disappointed in my life choices. It was another thing entirely to learn that he had constructed an entire false narrative about who I was as a person and how I felt. David, in all the years you've known me, In all our conversations about your life and your relationships and your choices, have I ever once said or done anything that made you feel like I was judging you or looking down on you? No, he said. Immediately. Never. Emma, you're one of the most supportive people I know. When I was struggling in college, you're the one who helped me figure out how to change my major. When I was nervous about proposing to Sarah, you're the one who convinced me that I was ready. You've always been there for me. Then why is Dad so convinced that I'm this judgmental, selfish person? I don't know. Maybe because it's easier for him to believe that than to accept that you're actually happy with your life choices. Maybe because admitting that you don't need his approval or his vision for your life makes him feel less important. That observation hit me like a lightning bolt. I had always tried so hard to maintain a close relationship with Dad, to show him that I valued his opinions and his presence in my life. But maybe in building my own independent life, in making choices that didn't revolve around seeking his approval, I had inadvertently made him feel like he wasn't needed. David, do you think Dad loves me? The question hung in the air between us, and the fact that David didn't answer immediately told me everything I needed to know. Of course he loves you, he said finally, but there was something uncertain in his voice. Do you really believe that? Because someone who loves me wouldn't exclude me from his birthday party. Someone who loves me wouldn't talk about me the way you're describing. Someone who loves me would want to understand my choices, not punish me for them. Maybe he loves you but doesn't like you very much right now. The honesty of that statement was brutal, but I appreciated it. At least David was being real with me. Yeah, I said quietly. Maybe that's exactly what it is. We talked for a few more minutes, but there wasn't much more to say. David apologized again for not standing up for me, and I told him I appreciated his honesty even though it hurt to hear. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. I thought about calling some friends, reaching out for support and comfort, but something held me back. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was the realization that explaining this situation to people outside my family would require me to admit just how badly I had misunderstood my relationship with my father. Instead, I opened my laptop and started typing. I wasn't sure what I was writing at first. Maybe a letter to Dad that I would never send, maybe just a way to process my thoughts and feelings. But as I wrote, I realized I was telling my story, trying to make sense of how I had ended up here, excluded from my own family, and questioning everything I thought I knew about the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I wrote about the little girl who had tried so hard to make her father proud, who had studied hard and followed rules and always tried to be good. I wrote about the teenager who had listened when Dad told her she could be anything she wanted to be, who had taken those words seriously and worked toward goals that would make her independent and successful. I wrote about the young woman who had thought she was building exactly the kind of life her parents had encouraged her to build. And I wrote about the discovery that none of that mattered if it didn't fit into the narrow definition of success and happiness that my father had decided was the only acceptable path for his daughter. As I wrote, I began to understand something that was both liberating and heartbreaking. This wasn't really about me at all. This was about my father's expectations and disappointments, his need to feel important and needed, his inability to accept that love could take different forms than the ones he was familiar with. I had spent 32 years trying to be the daughter he wanted, and I had never realized that what he wanted was for me to need him in a way that I simply didn't. He wanted me to depend on him for approval, for guidance, for validation. He wanted my life choices to reflect his values and his vision for what a woman's life should look like. And when I had grown up to be independent and self-sufficient and happy on my own terms, he had taken it as a rejection of him rather than a testament to the strength and confidence he had helped instill in me. The realization didn't make the hurt go away, but it helped me understand that the problem wasn't with me. I hadn't failed as a daughter. I had simply succeeded in a way that my father couldn't appreciate or understand. But that still left me with the question of what to do next. How do you rebuild a relationship with someone who has such a fundamentally distorted view of who you are? How do you forgive a family that chose to exclude you rather than include you? How do you move forward when the people who are supposed to love you most have made it clear that their love comes with conditions you're not willing to meet? I stayed up until nearly 3 a.m, writing and thinking and trying to figure out what my next move should be. By the time I finally closed my laptop and went to bed, I had made a decision that surprised me with its clarity. I was going to go see my father. Not to apologize, not to beg for his acceptance, but to have the conversation we should have had months ago. I was going to tell him exactly how his actions had affected me, and I was going to give him the chance to explain himself, not through Marcus or David, but directly to me. And then I was going to decide whether this relationship was worth fighting for, or whether it was time to accept that sometimes even family love isn't enough to bridge the gap between who you are and who someone else needs you to be. I called in sick to work the next morning. It wasn't entirely a lie. I felt emotionally drained and physically exhausted from the sleepless night, tossing and turning as fragments of conversations with Marcus and David replayed endlessly in my mind. My body ached as if I'd run a marathon, and I knew I wouldn't be able to concentrate on anything productive. The thought of sitting in meetings, pretending everything was normal, making small talk with colleagues who had no idea my world had shifted overnight, felt impossible. Instead, I spent the morning pacing around my apartment, rehearsing what I wanted to say to my father, trying to find the right words to express 32 years of love, disappointment, and confusion that now felt tangled together in my chest, like a knot I couldn't untie. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, practicing different approaches. "Dad, we need to talk about Saturday." Too confrontational. "Dad, I'm hurt that you didn't invite me." Too passive. "Dad, what the hell is wrong with you?" Definitely too aggressive. Each version felt wrong, either too weak or too harsh, and I realized that no amount of rehearsal could prepare me for this conversation, the most important one we'd probably ever have. Around noon, after changing clothes 3 times and drinking enough coffee to make my hands shake, I drove out to Oak Park. The familiar route felt different somehow, like I was seeing it through new eyes, or maybe like I was driving toward a destination I'd never actually reached before. Every landmark I passed seemed to mock me with its normalcy. The coffee shop where Dad and I used to get hot chocolate when I was little, where he'd let me pile on extra marshmallows and we'd sit by the window, watching people walk by, him asking me about school and my dreams. The park where he taught me to throw a baseball, his large hands covering mine as he showed me how to grip the ball, his voice patient and encouraging as I threw wild pitch after wild pitch. The library where he would take me on Saturday mornings, where we'd sit side by side reading different books but sharing the same comfortable silence. All of it felt like it belonged to a different version of our relationship, one that maybe had never been as real as I thought it was, or one that had died somewhere along the way without me noticing. I found myself driving slower than usual, dreading what was coming but also desperate to get it over with. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles had gone white, and I kept rehearsing my opening lines, though they kept changing with each mile. Dad's house looked exactly the same as always, the white colonial with the blue shutters that he repainted every 3 years like clockwork, the carefully maintained lawn that he mowed in perfect diagonal lines every Saturday morning, the garden where he grew his precious tomatoes and would proudly show me each new bloom every time I visited, as if I hadn't seen his tomato plants 100 times before. The normalcy of it all made everything feel more surreal. This was the house where I'd grown up, where I'd spent countless hours, where I'd always felt welcome. How could it be the same place where a father lived who thought so little of his daughter that he'd deliberately exclude her from his birthday celebration? I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes, gathering my courage, watching the house as if it might give me some sign of what to expect. I could see the living room window where the curtains were partially drawn, could imagine him inside reading his newspaper or watching one of his old westerns. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears, and my mouth felt dry despite the 3 glasses of water I'd forced myself to drink before leaving home. Finally, knowing I couldn't sit there forever, I forced myself out of the car and walked up the front steps, my legs feeling strangely unsteady. I stood at the door for another moment, my finger hovering over the doorbell, wondering if this was the right thing to do, if maybe I should just go home and pretend Saturday night had never happened. But I knew I couldn't. This had to happen. I rang the doorbell. He opened the door wearing his reading glasses, the ones with the thin silver frames that made him look older than I remembered, and a confused expression, like he couldn't quite believe I was standing there. His hair was more gray than I'd noticed at our last lunch together, and he looked smaller somehow, frailer, which caught me off guard and made me feel a strange mix of tenderness and anger. "Emma? What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" His voice carried genuine concern, the same tone he'd used when I was a child and had come to him with a scraped knee or a broken toy. "Hi, Dad. I need to talk to you." My voice came out steadier than I'd expected, though I could feel it threatening to shake. He stepped aside to let me in, and I followed him into the living room where I had spent countless hours as a child, watching TV with him on Sunday afternoons when Mom was doing laundry and the house smelled like fabric softener, doing homework at the coffee table while he read the newspaper in his favorite armchair, the brown leather one that had molded to the shape of his body over the years. The room looked exactly the same. His reading glasses case on the side table next to his chair, the TV remote in its designated spot, the small stack of books he was always meaning to read but never quite got around to. Even the smell was the same, a mixture of his aftershave and the lemon wood polish he used on the furniture. Being there felt like stepping back in time, except everything was different now because I was different, because I knew things I hadn't known before. "Can I get you something to drink?" he asked, falling back into the automatic politeness that had always characterized our interactions, the careful dance we'd perfected over the years of keeping things pleasant and surface level. "No, thank you. I just need to talk." I was surprised by how calm I sounded when inside I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. He settled into his armchair with the careful movements of someone who was starting to feel his age, and I took a seat on the couch across from him, in the same spot where I'd sat 1,000 times before for very different conversations. For a moment, we just looked at each other across the familiar space that suddenly felt like a chasm, and I could see something in his eyes. Not quite guilt, but definitely discomfort. Like he knew exactly why I was there and had been dreading this moment as much as I had. "Dad, I saw the photos from your birthday party." I said it simply, without accusation, just stating a fact. His face didn't change, but I saw his shoulders tense slightly, saw his fingers grip the arms of his chair, just a little tighter. He looked like a man who had been caught doing something he knew was wrong but wasn't quite ready to admit it. "I talked to Marcus yesterday," I continued, watching his face carefully. "And David, they told me that you specifically asked them not to invite me." "Emma," he started to speak, but I could tell he didn't know how to finish the sentence. "Please let me finish. I need to say this, and I need you to listen." My voice was still steady, but I could feel the emotion building behind it like water behind a dam. He nodded slowly, settling back in his chair in a way that suggested he was preparing himself for something difficult, and I realized that maybe part of him had been waiting for this conversation too. I have been thinking about this for 2 days straight, trying to understand how we got to this point. How the father who used to tell me I could be anything I wanted to be, who helped me with my science projects and drove me to debate tournaments and bragged about my grades to anyone who would listen, somehow grew up to be disappointed in me for becoming exactly what he encouraged me to become. "I never said I was disappointed in you." His voice was quiet, defensive. "You didn't have to say it. Excluding me from your birthday party said it loud and clear, louder than words ever could have." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to hold on to the calm I'd managed to maintain so far. "Marcus told me that you think I'm selfish, that you think I visit you out of duty and call you out of obligation, that you think I'm too independent and too focused on my career." Each word felt like I was pulling splinters out of my skin. "Is that really what you think of me, Dad? That every time I drive out here, every time I take you to lunch, every time I call to check on you, it's just because I feel like I have to?" Dad's face reddened slightly, a flush creeping up his neck the way it always did when he was uncomfortable, but he didn't deny it. His silence was somehow worse than if he'd argued with me. "David told me that you think I look down on him and Marcus for their choices, that you think I would have ruined your party by judging everyone else's life decisions." I could hear my voice starting to crack despite my efforts to stay composed. "Do you really think I'm that kind of person? Do you really think I sit in judgment of my own brothers? Emma, you don't understand." He started again, but I could see in his eyes that he was scrambling, that he didn't have a good explanation for any of this. "No, Dad, I think I understand perfectly. You have created this version of me in your head that bears no resemblance to who I actually am. This cold, selfish, judgmental person who looks down on everyone else and only does the right thing because she feels obligated to. And instead of talking to me about your concerns, instead of trying to understand my perspective, or asking me how I actually feel about anything, you decided it was easier to just exclude me from. I felt tears building behind my eyes, hot and insistent, but I pushed through them because I needed to finish this. Do you know what I was doing Saturday night while you were celebrating with the whole family? I was at home, alone, reading a book and drinking tea. The same Saturday night routine I've had for months because I don't have much of a social life outside of work and family. I had no idea that everyone I love was 10 miles away, eating cake and laughing and celebrating, while I was sitting in my apartment wondering if I should call you to say happy birthday again, even though I'd already called that morning. My voice broke slightly on the last few words, and I had to stop to gather myself. And when I found out, I didn't feel angry at first. I felt confused. I felt like there must have been some mistake, some misunderstanding because I couldn't. Imagine that my father, the man who raised me to believe that family comes first, would deliberately exclude me from something so important. I actually spent an hour going through my phone, wondering if I'd somehow missed a text or a call, wondering if maybe I'd forgotten to check my email because the alternative, that you didn't want me there, was too painful to consider. Dad was looking down at his hands now, the weathered fingers that had taught me to tie my shoes and throw a baseball now fidgeting restlessly against his knees. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his breathing had become shallow and deliberate. And I recognized the signs. He was struggling with something deep, something that had been lodged in his chest for far too long. But it wasn't a mistake, was it? It was a choice. You chose to hurt me rather than include me. You chose to believe the worst about my motivations, rather than asking me directly how I felt. You chose to punish me for living my life differently than you expected instead of trying to understand why I made the choice. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with years of accumulated hurt and misunderstanding. I watched as they landed, saw the way his shoulders sagged slightly, as if the weight of my accusation was pressing down on him. Emma, I didn't. His voice was quieter now, almost hoarse, and there was something fragile in it that I hadn't heard since I was very young, maybe since Mom died, when grief had stripped away all his usual certainties. But you did hurt me. You hurt me more than I knew it was possible to be hurt by someone I love. The admission escaped from somewhere deep in my chest, a place I'd kept carefully locked away for years. I felt exposed saying it, vulnerable in a way that made my skin feel too thin, but it was the truth, the raw, unvarnished truth that had been eating away at me long. I wiped away a tear that had escaped despite my efforts to stay composed, despite all my preparation for this conversation. My hand came away damp, and I felt a flicker of embarrassment at showing this weakness, this crack in my armor. Dad, I need you to understand something. I took a shaky breath, steadying myself for what felt like the most important words I'd ever spoken to him. Every Sunday when I call you, I call because I want to hear your voice. I want to know about your week, your garden, whether the tomatoes are coming in well this year, what you're planning to fix next around the house. I want to share my life with you because you're important to me. Not because it's an obligation on my calendar, not because I'm checking a box marked dutiful daughter, but because hearing you laugh at something I tell you about work or listening to you complain about the neighbor's dog makes my whole week better. His head was still down, but I could see his jaw working like he was chewing on words he wasn't sure he should say, grinding them between his teeth like he'd done when I was little and had asked him a question he didn't know how to answer. When I come visit, it's not because I feel obligated, it's because I genuinely enjoy spending time with you. I like sitting on your back porch in those old wooden chairs that creak every time we shift our weight, talking about nothing and everything while the sun sets behind the oak tree. I like helping you with projects around the house, even when you get frustrated with my technique and have to show me how to use the drill for the third time. I like being your daughter. I've always liked being your daughter. The last sentence came out softer than the rest, almost a whisper, because it felt like the most vulnerable thing I could admit. That despite everything, despite all the hurt and distance and misunderstanding, I had never stopped wanting his approval, his love, his recognition that I was enough exactly as I was. And you're right that I chose to focus on my career. I chose to build an independent life. I chose not to get married young or have children right away like you always thought I should. But I didn't make those choices to reject you or to reject family or to prove some point about how modern women should live their lives. I made them because they felt right for me, because they made me happy, because they allowed me to become the person I wanted to be. Not the person you wanted me to be, not the person society expected me to be, but the person I actually am, deep down, when I strip away all the expectations and should-haves and supposed-tos. I leaned forward in my chair, trying to close some of the physical distance between us, trying to bridge the emotional chasm that had opened up over the years. "Dad, look at me." He finally raised his head, slowly, reluctantly, like it took physical effort to lift it. When our eyes met, I could see something in his expression that I hadn't expected. Shame. Raw, unmistakable shame that made his usually confident features look almost fragile, almost childlike in their vulnerability. I am not selfish for wanting to support myself, for taking pride in my work, for building something with my own hands and my own mind. I am not judgmental for making different choices than Marcus and David, for not following the path that seemed so clear and obvious to everyone else in our family. I am not cold or distant or dutiful, going through the motions of caring because it's what's expected of me. My voice broke slightly on the last few words, and I had to pause to collect myself, to find the strength to say what needed to be said. I am your daughter, and I love you, and I have been trying my whole life to make you proud of me. Not proud of some version of me that fits into the box you built in your mind, but proud of who I actually am, flaws and ambitions and complicated choices and all. I am proud of you, he said quietly. Are you? Because excluding me from your birthday party doesn't feel like pride. It feels like disappointment and rejection. We sat in silence for a moment, and I could see him struggling with something internal. Emma, he said finally, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. I waited, my heart pounding. Your mother and I, we had a fight about you, about a month before she died. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. Mom had died 3 years ago, and Dad had never mentioned any fight about me. What kind of fight? She was sick, and we both knew she was dying. And she was worried about you. Not because she thought you were making bad choices, but because she was afraid that after she was gone, I wouldn't understand you anymore. She was afraid that I would try to make you into something you weren't, instead of appreciating who you were. I stared at him, completely stunned. She told me that you were the strongest of all our children, that you were brave enough to build your own life, to make your own choices, to be happy on your own terms. She said that was something to be celebrated, not criticized. What did you say? I said that I was worried about you being alone, that I was scared that you would end up isolated and unhappy, that you would regret not having a family of your own. And she got angry with me, really angry. Dad took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. She said that you already had a family, us, and that if I couldn't see how amazing you were, how successful and happy and fulfilled you were, then I was the one with the problem. She said that I was so focused on what I thought your life should look like that I was missing the beauty of what it actually looked like. I felt tears streaming down my face now, but I didn't try to stop them. She made me promise that after she was gone, I would support you and love you exactly as you were, that I would stop trying to change you and start appreciating you. But you didn't keep that promise. No, I didn't. And I've been feeling guilty about it ever since. He put his glasses back on and looked directly. Emma, I excluded you from my party because I was ashamed. I was ashamed that I had broken my promise to your mother. I was ashamed that every time I saw you, I was reminded of how badly I had failed to understand you. I was ashamed that I had spent the last 3 years being disappointed in you instead of being proud of you. So you decided it was easier to just not see me. I told myself that it would be better for everyone, that you would be happier not having to deal with my judgment and criticism, that I would be happier not having to confront my own failures. As a father, Dad, that's not how love works. You don't get to decide what's better for me without asking me. You don't get to make choices about our relationship without including me in the conversation. I know. He stood up from his chair and walked over to the window, looking out at his garden. Emma, I need you to know that everything Marcus and David told you about what I said, it's not true. Not really. I don't think you're selfish. I don't think you look down on your brothers. I don't think you visit me. Then why did you tell them those? Because it was easier than admitting the truth. It was easier than saying that I was hurt that you didn't need me the way I wanted you to need me. It was easier than admitting that I was jealous of your independence and your confidence and your ability to be happy without seeking my approval. He turned back to I wanted to be the father who walked you down the aisle. I wanted to be the grandfather who taught your children to ride bikes and throw baseballs. I wanted to be the person you called when you needed advice or support or just someone to talk to. And when it became clear that you were building a life where you didn't need me for any of those things, I didn't know how to handle it. Dad, I do need you, just not in the ways you would. I know that now, but it took almost losing you completely for me to understand it. I stood up and walked over to him, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe properly. Dad, I need you to know that I would have loved to celebrate your birthday with you. I would have loved to be there, to toast to your health and happiness, to share in that moment with our family. Being excluded from that hurt more than any criticism or judgment. I know. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry. I also need you to know that I don't judge Marcus and David for their choices. I'm genuinely happy for them. I love being an aunt. I love seeing them build their families and their lives. Their happiness doesn't diminish my own, and my happiness doesn't diminish theirs. I understand that now. And I need you to understand that calling you every Sunday and visiting you regularly isn't something I do because I feel like I have to. It's something I do because I want to. Because you're my father and I love you and I want you to be part of my life. He nodded, and I could see tears in his eyes. Emma, can you forgive me? Can we try this? I thought about it for a moment, considering everything that had been said and everything that had been revealed. I can forgive you, Dad. But I need you to understand that things have to change. You can't exclude me from family events because you're uncomfortable with your own feelings. You can't talk about me negatively to Marcus and David instead of talking to me directly. And you can't make assumptions about my motivations or my feelings without asking me first. I understand. Better. And I need you to start seeing me for who I actually am, not who you think I should be. I need you to appreciate the life I've built even if it doesn't look like the life you imagine for me. I will. I promise. He hesitated for a moment, then opened his arms, and I stepped into them. It was the first time we had hugged in months, and it felt both familiar and strange, like coming home to a place that had been redecorated while you were away. I love you, Emma. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the woman you've become, the life you've built, the person you are. I should have told you that a long time ago. I love you too, Dad. We stood there for a moment, and I felt something shifting between us. Not a complete healing, but the beginning of one. We had a lot of work to do to rebuild our relationship, a lot of conversations to have, a lot of trust to rebuild. But for the first time in days, I felt hopeful that it was possible. Dad, I have an idea. What's that? Let's celebrate your birthday again. Just the two of us. Let me take you out to dinner, and we can talk about everything. Your life, my life, Mom, the future. We can start over. He smiled, and for the first time since I'd arrived, he looked like the father I remembered from my childhood. I'd like that very much. As I drove home that evening, I felt lighter than I had in months. The hurt was still there, and it would probably take time to fully heal. But I had learned something important about myself, and about love, and about family. Sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who have the hardest time understanding us. Sometimes their love comes wrapped in expectations and conditions that have more to do with their own fears and insecurities than with who we actually are. And sometimes, the most loving thing we can do is to insist on being seen and understood for who we truly are, even when that's uncomfortable for everyone involved. I had spent 2 days feeling like I was the problem, like I was the one who had failed somehow. But I realized that I hadn't failed at all. I had succeeded in becoming exactly who I was meant to be. And if that made some people uncomfortable, If that challenged their assumptions about what a daughter or a woman or a family member should be, then that was their work to do, not mine. My father and I had a long way to go, but we had taken the first step. We had been honest with each other, maybe for the first time in years. We had acknowledged the hurt and the misunderstandings and the failed expectations, and we had both committed to doing better. That empty chair at his birthday party would always be a reminder of what went wrong between us. But it would also be a reminder of what we had learned, that love isn't always easy, that understanding takes work, and that sometimes the most important conversations are the ones we've been avoiding. I was still his daughter and he was still my father. But now we both understood that those relationships would have to be built on who we actually were, not who we thought we should be. And that, I realized, was the beginning of something much more real and much more valuable than what we had before. The next Sunday, when I called him for our weekly conversation, he answered on the first ring. "Hi, sweetheart," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "How was your week?" And for the first time in months, I told him the truth about everything. My work, my friends, my hopes, my fears, my dreams. And he listened, really listened, without trying to fix or change or judge anything I said. It was the best conversation we had had in years. 6 months later, I would receive a text from my father with a photo attached. It was a picture of him at a restaurant, sitting at a table with an extra chair pulled up beside him. The text read, "Saving your seat for next week's dinner. Love, Dad." I smiled and typed back, "I'll be there." And I was.